you're giving such beautiful examples of all the things you discuss, almost like a checklist in the chapter. But the one thing which absolutely uh, helped me help my clients get on this right from day one was the chart you have in the chapter. Let me show you that diagram, the graphic, which is a lot about how quickly someone can even start doing it right today, right now. Tell us about
Yes,
that. Tell us about just one of these things.
sure. So I recognize that I'm a little bit of a pioneer in this regard. I think when you
Mhm,
read about conflict, you'll hear about crucial conversations, which is a great course. You'll hear about
mhm,
active listening. There's
mhm,
one group out there that has an acronym called Pearl. Language of Caring, which is another group, has a approach to sort of scripting of conversations.
mhm,
Reality is, for me, I can't remember that stuff. I'm so attuned into the moment that I want to develop a skill set that I can use in multiple different places. And then I can sort of follow my gut.
mhm,
And rather than trying to sit here and carry on an internal conversation, do I do step one or step two? Wait, which one am I supposed to do? That
mhm,
isn't helpful for me, the way I process.
mhm,
So I really think this chart is a reflection of how can I improve as a servant leader to empower others to be the best versions of themselves.
mhm,
Because when I stepped into my current role, for example, and then I'll go to this chart, but I think this gives context. So I came to Mississippi, to the North Mississippi Health Services, two-time Baldrige winning system in rural Mississippi. And within 6 weeks, we were in the middle of COVID. And we saw it coming, because the first case was in Washington State. So we had a little bit of time,
mhm.
but I didn't even know how to pronounce some of the towns where we had hospitals. I
Oh,
didn't know anybody. And the reality was a dictatorial approach to leadership, or one where I was the kingpin of all decisions, would have failed. And my CEO has taught me push decisions out to those who are best capable of making that decision whenever possible. And so what we did is we modeled where our rate limiting steps were, we augmented those, we developed relationships. We came from a humble place that everybody matters. And that really allowed us to go forward. But to do that, I had to have each of these 6 skills. But I realized as I began to coach to these with my peers and those who reported to me and those other servants beside me, that not everybody had thought about it this way. In fact, nobody else had thought about it this way. And so
mhm,
I wanted to give them an opportunity to develop the skills without even really saying, let's mine for conflict, because that
mhm,
means different things to different people. And
mhm,
so I always start with the mindful listening, but I think an incredible augmenter of that is assumption of good intent.
mhm,
And I think this is so evident during COVID because everybody was wearing masks. And I don't know if you noticed this, but people, when they wore masks, it appeared to me, they thought that their nonverbals were not being identified.
okay.
They so had associated all their nonverbal with their mouth reactions that they felt like, they didn't have to hide how they really felt,
Mhm,
because people will put on a facade of liking you or
mhm,
agreeing with you or whatever, but inside they felt differently, and so they managed their face quite a bit.
mhm,
But the reality is their whole rest of their body screams different messages.
mhm,
And with a mask on, that you're no longer distracted by their face. So I'd watch their shoulders scrunch up or their hands clench, or them slouch, or I don't like arm crossing as an identifier, because I found people just when they're comfortable do that. But different activities, tapping of fingers. And what I realized is I could affect those responses just by thinking about someone in something in that other person that I either respected or liked. And I think I even use in the book that
mhm,
when you really have a difficult time, when it's somebody that you really do not like or do not respect, but you need to have a generative conversation, it can be as simple as, wow, those are great looking shoes.
yes.
Or, that's a nice bow tie. Or,
Mhm,
boy, they're a great father or a great mother. And that assumption of good intent, and if you think about that with a concentrated thought for a moment, your shoulders relax, your body relaxes, and it allows you to be open to listen to them, to understand, not reply without judgment.
Mhm.
And then it allows you to look for differences of opinion and with curiosity to actually be able to mine for, well, okay, what is the difference of opinion? Because I find naysayers are some of my greatest colleagues,
Mhm.
because the beauty of a good naysayer is they've done research. They
Mhm.
are ready. They're coming in loaded for bear. And I actually find when I listen to understand, not reply, they're totally taken by surprise by that. I mean, they are coming in for a fight. And when I just want to understand their opinion and I value it, and we look at, okay, how can we move forward? It really changes the game. And even if I'm not going to be able to agree with that thought process, I can say, could we try this for 6 weeks? And if it was successful, how would you know it? And how would I know it? And can we agree upon that outcome and
Mhm.
set an opportunity at 4 and 6 weeks to reflect on it? And the
Mhm.
way I learned that was the first time I was called on that myself. So I had a team, and as I shared, it was an ICU, a very high level team, and we had patients on ventilators. And there were two ways that we managed the moisture and the heat of the air they breathed.
Mhm.
And one was with a sponge, and that would manage the moisture and also, protect against, things getting into the breathing tube, but it really was there to manage the moisture. And
Mhm.
then the other was a heated wire that sort of heated the air as it passed from the ventilator to the patient. And I was a firm believer that you had to have a heated wire tube, but they're much more expensive. And it was based on anecdotal history that I'd had, that a
Mhm.
couple patients with the sponge approach had actually had mucus develop within the tube that occluded it, and we'd had to change out the tube. But my team thought that that was not really true, that the
Mhm.
data didn't really support that. So
Mhm.
they asked, and they felt, there were more of them that felt this way than I did. Could we try 6 weeks? I'm like, oh, I wish I had never told them that, but could we try 6 weeks of using the sponge and then monitor how many tubes are occluded? And if we don't have any tubes occluded and this data supports it, could we switch to this and make a very significant financial impact, as well as a much decreased effort by the respiratory therapists for managing these patients?
Mhm.
Sure enough, I had to do it. Didn't want to do it, but I had to walk the walk because I had
Mhm.
talked the talk. And it
Mhm.
was a much better approach, and it was very effective, and we switched.
Yes.
But when I did that as a leader, man, then I could hold them accountable, and they actually wanted to be accountable because I'd walked the walk. So
Mhm.
the other thing about mining for conflict is it gives you an opportunity to be vulnerable.
Mm.
They knew that I didn't agree with this approach, but that I was going to support it because it was what the team wanted to do, and the data was not conclusive. So it was the right thing to try. And they respected that vulnerability, which I think is, as I said earlier, a superpower of servant leadership. So mining for conflict, it's foundational. It's a piece of rebar, and that assuming good intent, mindful listening, um, paraphrasing back what the
Mhm.
person had said to be able to sculpt the messages. Those techniques are each can be individually learned, and slowly they meld together. But I I truly do not believe anyone should be overwhelmed by this thought process,
Mhm.
and doesn't even have to agree with this thought process that I put forward. Just, if anything, try either assume good intent or listening to understand, not reply without judgment, and you'll be amazed at how it changes conversations for you.
Yes, and I read that you describe it as a journey, not like some kind of weird destination you're gonna get to, and not waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm still on that journey. I'm a work in progress for sure. And yet, um, the ability to develop relationships of trust is so impactful. And sometimes, people don't have to say things. You can sort of assume there might be conflict. And by prophylactically intervening, it can be really powerful. An example is in the state of Mississippi right now, we've had flooding. And one of our sister communities in the South, Jackson, all of their water has gone bad.
Mm-hmm.
So our volunteer department, under the direction of our chief operating officer, has decided to donate bottled water to Jackson, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know our volunteers are working on that, but I thought to myself, how could I leverage this? And people want to do great things. So I reached out to a friend in the community who owns a grocery store, and I said, hey, could we get a deal on water? If I bought, do you have enough water that I could buy 4 flats of water and we could donate that? And I'm willing to pay for that myself, but I recognize giving is really fulfilling and a team bonding experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent out to all my senior leaders, hey, we've got this deal on water. We're going to actually showcase this grocery store, even though they didn't know we were going to do that, just out of our niceness. And would you like to be able to give? And I didn't ask for any specific money. I just asked. Mm-hmm. And, you had people giving, $10 and people giving $240. And it's just amazing. They felt fulfilled. But I got to thinking, well, I may have just distracted from the volunteers getting their water. They may feel concerned or worried or like they've failed because not enough water comes to them to feel like they've been impactful. So I thought, wow, that could be a conflict for them internally. Why don't I mine for it? So I called the second in charge for the volunteers, and I said, hey, Jessica, I just want you to know that you guys are doing a great job, and you were so inspiring to me that I reached out to my friend, and we're going to do this, but it's so much water. I mean, this is now 970 bottles of water or cases of water. Mm-hmm. So we can't really bring that in the front door of the hospital and put it in the lobby. And so I shared that we were going to work on picking it up and that kind of thing. And I said, see how you inspired our community to change this? I'm so proud of you and this approach you've taken. And thank you so much. Well, it turns out my wife, who is a volunteer, but people don't necessarily know she's my wife, was in the office when I called. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. So this morning I'm getting ready and I'm putting on my sports coat and stuff. And she goes, hey, I just wanted to let you know how impactful your phone call was. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And she said, well, Jessica must have went on and on about how special she felt and how valued she felt and how appreciated she felt that a senior leader had acknowledged the efforts of the volunteers and that it had given her fulfillment and that she felt so empowered to try to make a difference. And so this mining for conflict is almost like dropping a pebble in a pond. And those ripples of love and respect, they just continue to go on, and people want to do their best. And it's amazing how impactful you can be as a human being if you start by sort of looking outward rather than inward. How can I listen to you? How can I help you feel valued? And I love it.